Corbyn accuses May of appeasing Trump by not standing up to the U.S. over punishing steel tariffs. Jeremy Corbyn will accuse Theresa May of appeasing Donald Trump and failing to stand up to him over punishing steel tariffs today. In a speech to the GMB union, the Labour leader will brand Mrs. May too weak and insist her response has been timid. The Prime Minister spoke to the U.S. President last night to protest the imposition of 25% tariffs on all steel made in Europe, including in the UK. Her Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, has criticized the tariffs but urged the EU not to take immediate retaliatory action to give Mr. Trump time to change his mind. Mr. Corbyn will insist a Labour government would upgrade the economy instead of pursuing trade deals. Mr. Corbyn is expected to say, U.S. President Donald Trump's latest unilateral steel tariffs are wrong. The Trump tariffs risk hurting workers in the United States and around the world by sparking tit-for-tat retaliation. But U.S. workers, whether in steel or any other industry, are not wrong to want a government that actively supports them and the real, everyday economy. For 40 years, they've seen a completely rigged system shift more and more power and wealth to a tiny financial and political elite. Donald Trump's government doesn't support workers. Trying to hold back the tide with one hand and giving eye-watering handouts to the super-rich with the other is no substitute for a government taking a proactive role in modernizing and upgrading industry so that it's cleaner, more efficient and works for the many not the few. He will add, the next Labour government will work with the real experts, workers, technicians, engineers and designers, their unions, consumers and communities, to upgrade our economy by taking on the power of the tiny elite that's holding us back with their failed free market fundamentalism. Theresa May is appeasing Donald Trump in the hope of getting a race-to-the-bottom trade deal with the U.S. after we leave the European Union. The Trump trade tariffs show that's a Tory pipe dream. A study by GMB today named 5 constituencies at most risk from job losses in the steel industry: Aberfan, Scunthorpe, Newport East, Corby and Rotherham. The steel industry supports more than 34,000 jobs, with annual wages of more than £1 billion, and £230 million paid in tax and national insurance contributions, said the union. General Secretary Tim Roach said, "These figures hammer home the potential harm of Donald Trump's tariffs, which could have a devastating impact on jobs, steel communities and the wider UK economy. The government needs to stand up for our steel industry and UK manufacturing, not leave us at the whim of a protectionist president who will only ever put America first." Tariffs are charges which governments can slap on certain goods or products imported into the country. Governments usually try to negotiate minimum tariffs so that goods can be traded freely around the world. This is because for many years most politicians have agreed that free trade leads to greater wealth and makes products cheaper to buy in the shops. But China has massively ramped up the amount of steel it has produced in recent years and dumped it cheaply on the market. This global steel glut has made it far harder for steel industries in other countries to compete, prompting plant closures and job losses. In the U.S. this has sparked widespread anger which has led to Donald Trump imposing his hefty tariffs in a bid to protect the American steel industry. But critics around the world have blasted the move, warning this will result in a tit-for-tat trade war which will only push up prices in the long term. And while Mr. Trump has hinted Britain could be exempted from the charges, practically this would be impossible while the UK remains in the EU, which imposes and receives tariffs as a single trading bloc. There would have to be an EU-wide exemption for Britain to avoid the tariffs. Last night, Mrs. May told Mr. Trump his steel tariffs are unjustified and deeply disappointing in a phone call. The Prime Minister's official spokesman said the 30-minute call was constructive and said they agreed to discuss the issue further at the G7 summit in Canada later this week. It was the first time the two leaders have spoken since the U.S. president imposed his 25% levies. The PM's official spokesman said, the Prime Minister raised the U.S. decision to apply tariffs to EU steel and aluminium imports which she said was unjustified and deeply disappointing. She said the US and UK and EU are close national security allies and we recognize the importance of the values of open and fair trade across the world. The Prime Minister also underlined the need to safeguard jobs. The U.S. president has imposed the hefty tariffs in an attempt to curb China's aggressive steel dumping. Beijing has spent years shoveling steel into the global market at knockdown prices. It has forced down the price of steel in both the United States and Europe, causing a loss of jobs in the so-called Rust Belt of America, a key constituency for Mr. Trump. The dumping prompted Mr. Trump to invoke national security as his justification for imposing the tariffs. Mr. Trump ran on an America First manifesto which pledged to impose big tariffs to hit back at China. But some of America's closest allies, including Britain and the EU, have been caught in the trade war. Brussels has threatened to hit back by imposing a wave of tariffs on U.S. goods including motorbikes, jeans and orange juice within weeks. This has fueled fears the world is set to lurch into a trade war which will push up prices,